My mom always said I wasn't shy.
Today is April 19th, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Ron Adams in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. April 19th. That's the Murrah building.
Yeah. Boy, what a sad day in Oklahoma history.
So, where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born at the Memorial Hospital here in Bartlesville, Oklahoma.
And when's your birthday?
6/22/47. One day after summer.
Who's your father?
Jack Adams.
Jack Adams. And your mother?
My mother was Mary L. Adams.
What was her maiden name?
Smith. And listen, Joe, I had a terrible time checking my genealogy out. Can you imagine what that was like?
Mary Smith?
I never got into Ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me put it this way. I did it one time, and after about a month, and I was coming in every day having 100 emails of people that were thinking I was related to them. I said, I can't do this. I can't answer all these emails, and not a one of them are related to me.
When did you graduate high school?
I graduated in 1965.
From where?
From College High.
Not College High.
And we're fixing to have a reunion
Mm-hmm.
May 7th here in Bartlesville.
Who was your favorite teacher?
Ruth Rickman.
Why was she your favorite?
She loved children.
And she taught where?
She taught at Labadie Heights School
Labadie Heights School.
and was my 4th grade teacher. And I think that was probably where I learned the most basics of education, was with her as my teacher.
Now, you lived in what they call Pruneville.
That's correct. Sure did.
Why is it Pruneville?
Well, a lot of the families that worked for National Zinc come from Poland, and they were, of course, Polish, and they were Catholics, and they did quite a bit of work. The families did, for the smelters. Everybody out there in that community was somehow related. They might not have a Polish name, but they married it, into it, so they was all pretty well related. And here we came out and settled out there. And in my 1st grade, I was constantly in trouble all the time because they would tease me and call me a city slicker. And that would just really make me mad. And I got into some pretty good fights. At a drop of a hat, too.
What type of work did your father do?
My dad was a milkman, and he originally started with Top-Hand Dairies, and it later, of course, became Glencliff and then Page Milk Company. And I think Dad was 57, I believe, when the company, Page Milk Company from Coffeyville, closed, and he was laid off, and rest of his life, he worked in grocery stores and stuff. Something that he did when he was growing up as a boy.
Yep.
Because my grandfather owned a mercantile store in Hominy, out in the country, and
What was his name?
His name was John Samuel. Not related to the president. Seemed like all the Adams, you either had John or John Samuel in the family. That was pretty common.
Glencliff Dairy.
Yes.
There on Frank Phillips.
Yeah.
Did your father work there?
Now, it originally, from what I have understood over the years, that Glencliff actually owned it at first, and they had the ice house next door to it. And then Crystal Creamery, or I should say Crystal Ice, came in and bought it from Glencliff. And at first, it was called Crystal Creamery. Well, the IRS or somebody told them that they had to change the name because they couldn't have the ice company and the creamery. So they put on a contest here in Bartlesville to change the name. And this lady came up with the winning change of the, like I said, of the milk company to Top Hand Dairies. And they had a little milk bottle that dressed up like a cowboy and had a rope, little sachet, you know. And that was so funny to see your dad's milk truck, you know, coming down with that little cowboy on it. It had a 3-digit phone number on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a neat truck too. It was one of them old 40 model snub nose, you know. And I remember Dad when he'd come home. We was living on Cheyenne at that time, and we was just a block away from the Washington School. And there was an old grocery store in the middle of the block there on Frank Phillips Boulevard between Santa Fe and let's see, Cheyenne. Yeah, Seminole, Cheyenne.
Was that Wareheim's?
No, it wasn't Wareheim's. Doggone. No, I didn't think I'd ever forget that name. Anyway, we'd see Dad go by. When Lion Joe and I was little, we'd see Dad go by in the milk truck. And we was always told that we couldn't go beyond the corner of that block. And so when we saw Dad, we thought, nah, we can go down there at the store. And we get down there and we walk in, and Dad's delivering milk in the back. And the store owner said, "Jack, your boys are here." And he came up from the back and he said, what are you boys doing here? You know you're not supposed to come around that corner." And we kept eyeing the candy jars. And he picked up on that real quick. He said, "Okay, I'll get you some candy." So he goes and buys us a paper sack, and we go down at the end of the block, sat there on it was like a little brick ledge, it seemed like it used to be right there on that corner, and we sat there and we'd eat that bag of candy, you know, wouldn't take it home, you know, because didn't want Mama to know how we got it. And so we'd eat that whole sack of candy. And so we got home, and me and I and Joe, we got to trying to think about what we could do, you know, for money, you know, raise money. So we came up with this idea, well, let's get buttons, Mama's buttons, and Dad, let's go to the garage and let's get the washers. So we ended up with a whole pocket full of washers and buttons. And we went down to the grocery store then, a week or two later, and we were eyeing them jars again, and the old man said, "Okay, boys, pick out what you want." So we did. He said, "Now you got to pay me." He said, "It's 14 cents. We pulled out them washers and buttons, and he took them. And he couldn't. He was real sober. He didn't laugh or anything, you know. So we go back home, and there we are again, you know, eating the candy. And Dad comes in later to the store, and he said, "Jack," he said, "your boys was here." "What?" "Yeah." He said, "They bought some candy." "Well, how in the world did they buy the candy?" He kicked open his cash register door and he laid their washers and buttons out. He said, "You owe me 14 cents. And they both just laughed, you know. Well, then when Dad got home, he went and told my mom what we'd done, and we got a really good whipping. But boy, that was a funny event. It really was.
What did you do after high school?
What did I do after high school? Well, I went to college.
Where?
over at Miami, NEO, Northeastern, A&M. Gosh. Anyhow, went there for 2 years and then went down to OSU.
Oh, did you climb the mound?
I never did climb the mound. I don't know why. Just never did do it. Boy, that was a big attraction though for a lot of kids, and stuff. But
What about Circle Mountain?
now, oh yeah, we was all over Circle Mountain.
What's up there on Circle Mountain?
I don't really remember that much other than just oil wells, stuff. But of course, there's beautiful homes up there now.
Yeah.
But I remember that there was a school below the base there, and of course, there again, I don't even remember the name. But then it later became
Circle Mountain School.
Was it? Okay. Well, I think later on it became a church, and I remember us going there when we was little. And they had a Christmas program, and we got some toys given to us, there. But gosh, that was, like I said, a long time ago.
Labadie Heights School. Did you have Christmas programs at Labadie Heights?
Yes, we did. We put on little plays, and it was really cute. That was really kind of an unusual school building because they had these big doors that divided rooms, and they would fold back, and it would make one large room. And at the end of it, then they had a stage, and we would put on those little plays there. And we used to have box suppers there all the time to raise money for the school. Yeah.
Who is principal from Labadie Heights?
Ben, doggone, I don't remember. Palmer, Ben Palmer.
Ben Palmer.
That's right, because he had a son by the name of Glenn that lived here.
Tell me about him. What was he like?
Well, Ben and I, we had a real good relationship in that whenever I was ornery, he would have to penalize me or punish me, and I'll never forget one time I was in class with Mrs. Estel, which was my 5th and 6th grade. Well, the principal's office was the first room as you come into the school, and then we was in the second one. Well, I got to doing this whistle where it sounded like, it was a dive bomber, and then I'd do the explosion. And Mrs. Assel's up here trying to teach class, and here I'm going. Ben comes in, walks into her class one day, and she said, there's something going on outside. Or there's somebody that's been ornery in your class because it sounds like a dive bomber and they're exploding bombs. He said, is there anybody in here doing that? I held my hand up. I knew I was in trouble. So I just was honest. Mom said, you're better off to tell the truth,
Yeah.
And so he jerks me out of class and he takes me down to, I think, another room where there wasn't anybody in there. And he said, bend over that table. He pulled out this paddle about this long, and boy, did he brand me. Hit me about 3 times, and of course I had the tears coming out of my eyes, stuff. And it was so funny, though, when I got home, Mama had already heard about it. There was one time I thought it was so funny. Mama got into it with one of the teachers. It was Mrs. White, was my 1st grade teacher. She was trying to teach us penmanship, and I was left-handed. Well, I'd go to turn my hand and write with my left hand, and she would come and try to get me to go right-handed. And when I wouldn't do it, and she'd catch me using my left, she'd make me lay my hand out, and she would paddle my hand with a ruler. Well, that went on for a while. One night, I was doing my chore, washing my mom's dishes. She got the water a little hot. And here I was standing at the sink, and I started crying. And she said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" He said, "Oh, Mom, that water's hurt my hand." And said I pulled my hand up, and it was just blood red, and it was swollen. And she said, "What'd you do to your hand?" And she said, I told her, I said, "Well, Mom, Mrs. White been paddling my hand." I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, she wants me to write right-handed." Boy, that made her mad. The next day, she went down and saw Ben, and boy, he called Mrs. Estel out, and she came in, and Mom, or no, it was Mrs. White. Mrs. White pulled her in, and she told her, "Look, you're a teacher. This boy can't help it because the good Lord made him left-handed. Your job is to teach him to write the proper way." So she worked on me. She made me straighten my hand out, to write and hold the pencil correctly. Mm-hmm. And I started then writing perfectly. From that point, another time with old Ben, though, was Mom went down to see him and said, "Ben," said, "we're going to have to do something." Said, "This boy of mine, I'm getting tired of him coming home with his shirt completely just about tore off of him." And he said, "Well, I know he's been in a lot of scuffles." And she said, "Well, I'm getting tired of mending his shirts and sewing buttons on and everything." He said, "You're going to have to start whipping him." He said, "Well, I can do that." He said, "I don't really want to, but I can do it." So went along, and I got into it, and he pulled me into the back room again, and he put the paddle to me, and I never caused or created a fight after that, unless I was really provoked. Yeah. Anyway, that's my deal with Ben. He was a pretty decent principal, though. He was really into sports. We went through a period, where we was into sports quite a bit, and going to different towns, and stuff. But he got in trouble with one of the boys, and so they had to let him go. And then we had another teacher. It seemed like a principal. His name was Lipe, and he was a different sort. He was more of I'd say a wood teacher, really, because that's every time he'd get us started on a project, making bats or coat racks or whatever, Mm-hmm. And we spent more time doing that than we did studying in his class.
Lester Carter.
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Well, Lester was a really kind of a quiet boy, but he just had an air about him where he wasn't like, the rest of us kids. He was different. And he was slow, and he didn't act like, a normal child at our age. He was more of a might as well say a baby, His mind just wasn't right, And but the things that went on with him when teachers would bring him into class, they always would put him to the back of the room, and they didn't even call on him or anything. They knew they couldn't, because he just couldn't grasp what was going on at that time. And a lot of times the kids abused him,
What would they do?
Oh, they'd push him around. They'd slap him in the head. You know, take his papers or books or whatever and throw them off on the floor, and just really treated him real mean. And I got into it. You know, I couldn't take it. I couldn't see, you know, somebody hurting somebody, you know, or abusing them in any way. You know, he had a soft heart, and his nature was that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he really didn't know that he was being mistreated. He just, you know, would take it, and it certainly wasn't fair at all. He couldn't defend himself. Well, I'd lose my temper, and the first thing I'd do is I'd grab a hold of him, and like old Dad taught us how to fight. You know, he said you lead with your right and hit him in the gut and come across and hit him with a haymaker. And I blooded a lot of noses back in them days. But never got whipped. That was the good thing about it, was Ben didn't whip me for that.
So you stood up for Lester?
Yes, I did.
Why were the kids doing this to him?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with parents not teaching them. And it certainly wasn't something that we really went out of our way or the teachers didn't go out of their way, you know, to teach us any different, you know. We had bullies in school, you know, and they were the ones that would mistreat, you know, the little ones that had something, you know, that was different, you know, about them. And I remember Kay Williams, which was another girl that had, I think it was Down syndrome, and of course, they didn't have that name. They didn't know that name and anything about that. But it was, you know, it was just sad even how the girls would even treat her, you know. But they didn't know any different, you know. And that all come from the home, you know, naturally. And back in those days, I mean, you know, your mothers, they weren't working. There were very few women were working then. They were, you know, the parent at home that took care of bathing the kids, mending their clothes, fixing dinner. You know, well, when suburbia came and everybody started moving from the country, and they were, you know, things were growing in the town, you know, and stuff. So then the wives started going to work, and they weren't home, and they wasn't taking care of the kids, and the dads were all busy working.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids really got neglected. And we've got that big problem, really big problem today.
Now, Labadie High School, most of the students were from a rural area.
That's right. A lot of them.
Okay.
A lot of them.
Okay. So give me specifics of what you did with Lester. What did you do?
Well, I tried to make him like a buddy. I mean, like a friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I never did see. I always saw when we would have friends, you know, come to the house. Mom and Dad loved those kids just like we were one of their own, you know, and so they. You know, of course, we went through a period where our mother had mental illness. So I think that was another factor that we saw what mental illness had done to our mother, and that made us more in tune with, you know, people that had different personalities, attitudes, you know, and stuff, and we were kind of, I guess, became the defender,
mm-hmm.
you know. And I know we used to sit with Lester in the lunchroom, you know, and just tried to make him, you know, like a friend. And he always, you know, he always sensed there was something about us that wasn't like the other kids that abused them
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So, there was a period there when Lester left, and we didn't know where he was at, and it really was something that just didn't seem right, with school after he was gone. But he had, like I said, he always had a good nature about him, though. It's unfortunately still out there, I think we've gotten better, at diagnosing, problems and stuff with our children, but we're not, I don't think we're paying the attention that it needs still even today.
Yeah. I interviewed Connie and Lester, and Connie said the doctors still don't know what happened. They said he doesn't have a brain trauma, and it's really not autism, and they really don't know what the problem is.
Yeah. I've often wondered about this, Joe, if maybe at birth, he might have had, his mother may have had a problem with birthing him, and his mind might have gotten damaged by just from birth, of not getting out and getting his oxygen to his brain, and stuff quick enough. It makes you kind of wonder, if there isn't some of that is caused by that.
Now, Kay Williams with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
Did you do anything with her, or did the girls work with her?
Pretty much, my sister was the one that was around Kay quite a bit, and she just treated her like a normal friend.
Now, would the students mistreat Kay?
Some of the girls would.
Why?
Because she was different.
Mm-hmm.
Her mindset wasn't up to theirs, she was just so innocent, and I'd say that was about like with Lester too. Was willing, always willing, to participate, but a lot of times we wouldn't, some of us kids, we wouldn't let them, like go out and play ball or play on the playground, we'd always leave them standing off, to the sides by themselves. And that was another thing that was really sad. I mean, that I remember when we'd play baseball, we'd all line up and we'd choose, and Lester would never be chosen. He'd be sitting on the bench, I think a lot of that, if we had, it may be that it might have, it changed and helped him, but to some extent, because when you have an ability to communicate, with people. Well, let's take for example Mike Smith. Mike was like that, in it. But he, I don't know whether it was Down syndrome or what, he had that was, different about him, but he had a personality that was unbelievable. We had a lot of fun with him. Me and Boo Boo.
Yeah.
That was our fun deal with him.
Boo Boo.
Yeah, Boo Boo, Bruce Long. Old high school buddy.
Yeah.
We clowned together for several years.
So, Lester's still going strong today.
I know. I just think that's simply amazing, and that he's able to function.
Yes.
That was the other thing that so many people, thought that, if you were different, you couldn't handle a job. Well, that's totally wrong. That thinking, they can function. They can do certain things,
He works every day.
Yeah. It's kind of like blind people. Yes, you've got a handicap, but that doesn't mean that you can't do stuff. I said, I think really the thing that impressed me in my life was I worked for my uncle one time in Seattle, Washington, and he was a sales manager for Seattle Lighthouse for the Blind. And I went to the manufacturing plant and actually watched blind people working looms and would weave. And if you remember what those big looms look like, has several needles and you have to slide your thread across. And they were able to do it and not have their hands damaged or anything. They were very, very artistic with that. So,
Is there anything, if you could, anything that you would change about the treatment with Lester and Labadie Heights?
well, the one thing that they have done, but I there again, I don't know just how good it is, but the teaching. I think that the teaching is probably the most important thing. Of course, they have teachers now that that's what their occupation is to work with people that are different, and that's of course goes with teaching of people that are blind or hearing. It's amazing what they've come up with, the technology. But I'd say education really is probably the most important thing, because if they can center on certain things, just like I was saying about the blind people out there, they can be very productive. They can have a full life. They can live by themselves. And one thing that they need to continue to do is work with children to teach them not to be bullies. I'd say that's one thing right there.
Yes.
Get the counseling to these kids because they're not getting it at home. The parents today just don't take the responsibility on to teach their children to be good.
Ron?
And it's not that hard.
Ron, this is very good. We have to do another interview with you.
Okay.
on everything else.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, this is a very good interview.
I've enjoyed it, Joe.
Okay. And again, this is April 19th, 2022. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Ron Adams in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.